This episode of the Seniors Flourish Podcast is brought to you by the Learning Lab membership, because I get it. I was working with older adults in home health when I started out, and I was the only OT practitioner. I was new, I had no mentorship, I struggled with the little things at work, and I was so incredibly overwhelmed. I was struggling to keep up with that paperwork, and because I was working such ridiculously long hours, trying to research best practice, find all the patient handouts I needed, I just couldn't keep up with it all. And the worst part is I was constantly doubting myself. Am I really doing what's best for my new patients? That's why I created the Learning Lab, because I desperately needed a way to get organized and have everything I needed at my fingertips. So it's cheaper than a textbook, but it has hundreds of treatment idea videos, patient handouts, evidence-based resources, and more right at your fingertips when you need it. So join today at seniorsflourish.com/Learning Lab.
Welcome to the Seniors Flourish Podcast, where it's all about helping occupational therapy practitioners disrupt the norm by throwing away the rainbow art and being the best you can be when working with older adults.
Welcome everyone to the Seniors Flourish Podcast. My name is Mandy Chamberlain. I'm an occupational therapist, and we're talking about everything occupational therapy and working with the older adult, professional development, any topic around working with older adults. So I am so glad you're here. And if you're new to the show, I welcome you. Today I'm talking with my guest, Ericka. She's an occupational therapist. She blogs at joyenergytime.com. She is a fellow podcaster, which I always love talking to podcasters because we could talk forever. But her podcast is Burnout to Lit Up podcast, talking about burnout in healthcare. But today we're going to be talking about holistic approaches to occupational therapists and occupational therapy practitioners being burnt out. So welcome, Ericka. I'm glad you are here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh man, like we were chatting a little bit before, and I'm always like, oh yes, another fellow podcaster. Like,
the cool club.
Yeah, the cool club. See, we are a select few. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, this is a great topic, because obviously at some time in most of our careers, okay, I don't want to generalize too much, but we get burnt out, right? And so I'm excited that you're going to talk about it. And why don't you just start out with like your OT journey, how you found OT, and kind of what you're doing today.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take it back a little bit. And I remember being 5 years old and being obsessed with anatomy books and the human body. And I always thought I was going to be a doctor. So when I got to college, I surprised everyone with deciding to become a professional dancer.
Oh, just crack it out. Let's try something.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Because I danced my whole life, but when I was 12, I knew and I understood, I was old enough to see that my family was going through some financial struggles. So I decided to selflessly give up dance, and I didn't think about it again until I saw a show in the beginning of college. And I still quite can't explain to this day why I became so determined and obsessed with becoming a dancer, but it literally took over my life. And long story short, during that process, I lost sight of myself. I developed an eating disorder and became severely underweight. As a result of that, my bones were so weak, and it doesn't make sense how much effort I put into my body, like how I had that energy. I had no idea. But I had several broken bones in my feet from stress fractures. And over the course of 2009, I was sitting out for most of the time. And I started to rethink about this whole dance career. Like, is it really worth it? Am I really built for this? And one of my best friends in dance, she introduced me to another friend of hers that was an OT. I had no idea what occupational therapy was, but when she described it to me, I instantly fell in love, because I knew that you can combine creativity with science, which is what I loved. So I graduated with my bachelor's in dance, and literally 2 weeks later started in the OT program. And the rest of that was history. I fell in love with OT. I became an OT in 2013. And up until very recently, I worked mainly in outpatient pediatrics, a little bit of outpatient neuro with older adults. And last year, August 2017, I started Joy Energy Time, this brand and business around burnout prevention for healthcare professionals. And as we were talking about this earlier, before we started to record, my husband, he's a physical therapist. We actually met in school. So we left our home in Florida and we drove across the country, and he took on a travel physical therapy assignment, his first one, which is super exciting. This is so new and scary, but exciting for us. And this is the first time that I've decided to take on Joy Energy Time full time. So that's where I am today.
That's awesome. I always love the OT journey stories because it's crazy how people find OT. I feel like we just all find it somehow.
We just find it somehow.
I know. So thanks for sharing that. So after OT school and you worked in neuro and peds and that kind of thing, and so how did you become passionate about healthcare burnout? Is this from experience?
Definitely from experience. And it's a blessing in disguise, as I'll get to, but I can recall it was 2 p.m. Wednesday afternoon. I remember my patient like perfectly. I could even tell you his name, but of course I can't do that.
Of course not, right?
But I just remember that moment so clearly, and I apparently wasn't okay. My coworker looked at me. I was getting supplies out of the cabinet, and she could just see that I wasn't okay, and she just asked me, "Are you okay?" And I remember just closing the cabinet, and I just started crying in front of her and in front of a few other coworkers. And I didn't realize at the time until that moment that something was wrong, that I was experiencing burnout. So I did for the rest of, and this was my first job out of school. This was a few months after graduating. So I didn't know what to compare my situation to. I didn't know anything was abnormal or wrong. And my solution during that time was to take a few hours off in the morning. And that was a temporary fix at the time. And I was able to kind of balance out a little bit. And I was happy with the rest of my time at this place. Unfortunately, fortunately, I got engaged, which was good. But unfortunately, it was my husband, then fiance, lived kind of far. So I had to leave my job and find a new job because I was moving in with him. And this job, that was the epitome of my burnout. This is where the burnout really began. So in this new job, I'm like, okay, it's a new setting. Let's try it out. And it was my third day of work, only my third day of work. And I come home, get in bed, and I just start crying. And my husband just holds me. And I don't have to tell him anything. He just knew I had a bad day. And I just cried the whole night. And I was like, whoa, okay, maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I don't know how to deal with stress, or I can't cope. And it's just me. Like, I just convinced myself that I need to suck it up and be strong and put on a brave face. So I kept going on in this place for several months. And I started to see patterns of things going on that I didn't agree with. And I felt icky and bad about the way things were being done and the way that I felt like I had to do things, which led me to more of those breakouts or breakdowns. And I could always recall like speed walking to the bathroom just to be by myself for a second and just take a deep breath, or sometimes even cry, or sometimes even throw up, because when I get so nervous, I throw up, and it's weird to explain. It's embarrassing. I hate it, but that's what was happening. And I saw this pattern, and I noticed how I was being treated by everyone around me, and the owners and my boss and my supervisor. I felt neglected. I felt manipulated. I felt belittled and sometimes harassed. And I reached a point where I felt so uncomfortable that I voiced my concerns, like with respect and in the privacy of a small meeting. And I just felt like the way some things are being done, I don't agree with. This isn't right. And I thought I was taking a step in the right direction But that actually made me into the black sheep. And I felt like everyone was turning against me. Like, I spoke up. I said something about how I don't agree with certain things. And I was humiliated during meetings without my name being mentioned, but it was clearly about me in front of everyone. And I just felt completely isolated. And then I started to realize this isn't just me. Like, this is a problem in the system. And the very last breakdown I had before I left, this is how I would describe it. This is how I felt. I felt like I was just being ambushed and literally cornered. And this was when they knew that I wasn't comfortable with certain things. And I was being talked at how things should be done, what expectations I need to fulfill, and all this stuff. And I remember just excusing myself, going to the bathroom, breaking down. And the receptionist, God bless her, she kind of knew what was going on in the setting, that some things weren't right. She comes into the bathroom, locks the door, and she says, "Ericka, I think you need to leave here." And I was like, yeah, I can't do this anymore. And everything kind of fell into place. I got a job as an adjunct professor, and I found a per diem job, and I gave my 2 weeks. And even until the last second I walked out of that building, I was completely disrespected. And that was a few years ago. So that was really the epitome of my burnout. Once I left that facility and I started teaching and treating in pediatrics again, I felt like I just felt like this huge sense of relief, and I felt like who I was being restored. I was actually taking time now to work on myself and do self-development, which I had never done before, and really started to take care of myself. And then last year was when I never ever thought I would be an entrepreneur, but last year I decided, okay, this is a bigger problem than I thought. It's not just the person, it's more than that. It's the system, and I can make a difference in the healthcare industry, and I can do something about it. So that's kind of in a nutshell what happened.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing that. I connect with a lot of OT practitioners from all over the world, but you hear these stories. And I even had a guest, Samia, she did the podcast episode about the state of the SNF, like how to flip a SNF, and talking about like making a change in like working in skilled nursing facilities. And she had talked about kind of something, not exactly, but something similar in the sense that she got fired because she ended up standing up for herself and feeling like she ended up kind of being the black sheep, the pain in the butt. And she's like, and I got fired because of it. And she's just like, I was just standing up for what's right. And it's like those situations where you're just like, oh my gosh. It is, I shouldn't say it doesn't ever have to do with the patients, but it's mostly a lot of times it's it's like the administration or your team or the team not working and things like that. It's just crazy. It's so crazy. And it's really neat to hear that you took that situation and are doing something about it, developing courses and your website and your own podcast and trying to help others. So let's talk a little bit about statistics. I love all the research. Like I follow Ericka on Instagram. And if you want to follow her, she's at Joy Energy. Joy Energy Time is her Instagram handle. But I love all the research that you have because I'm a researching fool as well. So I'm always like, yeah, girl. So let's talk a little bit about like statistics of burnout in healthcare in general.
Okay, perfect. I just want to say the Instagram there's periods in between the Joy period energy period time, just to make searching easier. But it's hard because sometimes people don't see that. But yeah,
I'll put that in the notes.
Yeah, not a big deal. I'm sure if you typed in Joy Energy Time, there's only one person, so it's fine. But yeah, I love stats. I have a folder in my computer that's like endless amounts of studies, and I'm surprised there's no real stats on healthcare practitioners in general. It's broken down by profession. And before I go into the stats, I just want to clarify what burnout is and what it isn't, because I actually polled my Instagram audience, I think 2 weeks ago, and 44% of them, which is a very scientific study, of course, polling on Instagram.
Of course.
Yes. And 44% of my audience said that depression was a component of burnout, which is actually incorrect. So I just want to clarify what it is moving forward, because it's important. People sometimes will say, oh, I'm so burnt out, but they actually are using that interchangeably with, oh, I'm so stressed. And you can be stressed without being burnt out. Chronic levels of stress absolutely lead to being burned out. And I also want to note that depression, like feeling depressed, that can be an outcome of feeling burnt out. So everything's kind of like it's kind of gray. Depression is independent of work, whereas burnout is specific to work. So just like a little 101. And burnout has 3 main components, and they have to all kind of be together for burnout to be burnout. The first one is the big one, emotional exhaustion. Second one is feelings of cynicism, or feeling indifferent or detached to your work, your patients, or even the profession as a whole. And then the third one is a low sense of personal accomplishment. So it's those 3 things together that carry a lot of weight. So I just want to say first that, just generally speaking, as Americans, we already lend ourselves to high levels of work stress, because on average, we work 8 to 10 more hours than other developed countries. So it's important to note that even working over 50 hours a week can lead to increased risk for cardiovascular disease. And in healthcare, we do work a lot of hours for the most part. So we're already lending ourselves to that. But I just want to I'll get to the OT stats. I just want to share one about physicians and nurses, that there was a survey done of many U.S. physicians across all specialties, and they found that at least half of physicians in the U.S. have at least one symptom of burnout. And for nurses, there's been a ton of studies done, again, on each profession, but I remember reading this one study of nurses that there's a high level of emotional exhaustion. So this survey of 68,000 nurses, they found a 35% of high emotional exhaustion. So it seems like from what I've been looking at, the trends are high emotional exhaustion in many professions. For OTs, so I picked 2 studies for this podcast to talk about this. Okay, so the study on OTs, they found high levels of emotional exhaustion, which is no surprise, and they also found high levels of cynicism and low levels of personal efficacy. So the perfect recipe of burnout. So they were able to tease apart all those things. And another study actually found that OTs between the ages of 25 and 35, and those with between 6 to 10 years of experience, also have high levels of burnout. And they can only guess and speculate as to why that might be, but they're not quite sure. And the researchers of that study, they found a significance in the following things. They found low levels of detachment from work during non-work hours. They found high perceived workload, which we'll get into in a little bit. Low frequency of having a deep belly laugh, like having a good sense of humor, difficulty setting boundaries, low income satisfaction. And actually, I have a question for you, Mandy. Do you have any idea what work-related stress costs the U.S. per year?
Oh my gosh, as in maybe people calling off and that kind of thing? Or
in terms of money, how much money?
Oh, money. I'm sure it's $1 gazillion.
It's close. It's close.
I bet it's a lot.
It's a lot. It's $300 billion a year.
Is it really?
Yeah, the outcomes.
Insane.
Yeah, the outcomes of work-related stress costs us, the U.S., $300 billion a year, and that is in the form of absenteeism, presenteeism, high turnover, and low employee commitment. So so it's surprising, but not surprising. It's just all these stats out there. Every time I look healthcare burnout, I always see new stats for there's stats even by specialty. So whatever you want to find, it's out there.
It doesn't surprise me at all, but it also is an insane large amount of a percentage of the healthcare workforce and or just like money. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even know how accurate. I remember hearing a quote talking about, you talked about like some of those, things that qualify as contributing to burnout. And it's like the whole thing is like people don't always, it's like the lack of feeling like they make a difference in their job. And as OTs, you're talking about the whole belly laugh thing. Okay, we have potentially a really fun job. Like we can do fun things. We can potentially have good relationships with our patients. We can, get creative, and we can like look at the things that are important to the patient, and they are fun and you should be laughing. But like, I can see that those days where you're just like not into it at all. And you're like, this is the worst, but like overall it just is also kind of a bit disheartening. So what are like some of those, you have intrinsic factors, extrinsic factors that affect burnout. What are some of those?
Okay. So I'm going to start with the extrinsic factors. And I just want to say that I saw something so interesting the other day on Facebook, and a lot of Instagrammers, that are in healthcare, but unfortunately we were talking about this. Not as many OTs are on Instagram, but if you are, please let us know, because I saw someone, I think it was a physician, and she made this good analogy about when a doctor commits suicide, it's seen as the doctor's that doctor wasn't strong enough. But if you were to look at someone that died of cancer, you're not going to say that person wasn't strong enough. So there's this whole stigma around burnout, and it's actually more so related to those extrinsic factors. Intrinsic factors do play a role, but I think it's really about the extrinsic factors. And in research, there are 6 major areas. So I'm going to break them down. But first, they're workload, community, control, rewards, fairness, and values. So I'm going to start with the most obvious one, workload, because we can all relate to that, at least at one point, having a high amounts of work. And having a high amount of workload can lead to exhaustion. And actually, exhaustion is the first sign that someone's burning out, feeling that emotional exhaustion. It's the onset of it. So workload, it's important to note that workload is a very obvious one. I can recall just being an outpatient my whole career that it was always expected of us to do our documentation during our non-work hours, during non-billable time. And I just can recall so many nights and weekends, so many hours just doing documentation and having evaluations due on weekends. Like sometimes weekends weren't like they were. Like, for example, there's non-business days or business days or whatever. So one place, they didn't take into account that the weekend were, like, if something was due in 3 days and it fell on the weekend, then it fell on the weekend. Right. So it was like one of those things where high workload is, in my experience, an outpatient is a concern, because you need your non-work hours to recover. So when you have workload spilling into your non-work time, it can drain you. So workload is a huge one. And then you have community. Last week, I read a story about a nurse that committed suicide, and the investigators found that the cause behind it was likely due to bullying and harassment at work, which is just absolutely terrible to know that. I read stories like this every now and then, and when you look at it, it's a lack of community. It's a broken community, and community is such an important thing, because burnout is actually a social phenomenon. So it's actually contagious. If you're in a community that's strong and positive, and you feel that unity and you're working together, that can actually act as a buffer against high workload. To some degree. So having a strong community is really important. But if you have a broken community, if you have coworkers that don't support you, you're going to feel a low sense of accomplishment. And, if you feel like your supervisors don't support you and you don't find that sense of community, that can lead to exhaustion because you're constantly expending energy to do everything you can to please your supervisors or your coworkers. And if you don't have that strong ethic, that community, that could be one avenue to burnout. For control, also in my experience, when you have high demands placed on you, but you have low levels of control, that's going to have negative consequences like turnover and reduced productivity, because when you feel some ownership over anything, over your scheduling or your caseload or when you come in or how long your lunch is, I don't know, like anything that you find important, if you find some control, then you have more autonomy and that makes you more engaged. So having control or lack of control is also a huge indicator of burnout. And I remember like when I was in the very worst of my burnout at that facility, I could have I could have my caseload and it could do a 360 change whenever anyone felt like it. I could be double, triple treating if someone walked in without an appointment, without sometimes even an OT prescription. So, but they had a PT prescription and they needed someone to cover. And so I had no control over my caseload. And that really was a huge driving factor for me burning out. We have three more. We have fairness, which is fairness kind of overlaps with community, because in a community, everyone should be treated fairly. And so that's a huge one. But when you're talking about leadership and fairness, a leader should make fair decisions that serve everyone. So if someone's being, if a certain team or unit or a certain person if you see that they have favoritism or something is unfair, then that can also lead to feelings of resentment towards either your supervisor or your coworkers, like being left out, those type of things. Rewards. So I'm sure someone listening has, and it happened to me, have you ever had a high-paying job, but you left it because you weren't happy?
Yeah, right.
Because we know money's not everything.
Yeah.
And when we think of rewards, we think of, well, money, financial rewards. But that's actually just one sliver of rewards. You have status-related rewards when some people, they really look towards getting the promotion, becoming a supervisor, having job security. So there's reward that way. And there's also social emotional rewards. Like, how am I being supported by my peers? How do I feel safe? Do I feel valued? And so when I was in the epitome of my burnout, it was actually the highest paying job I've ever had. And that the benefits, everything was perfect on paper, but I was not, my social emotional rewards were completely neglected. So therefore that part of the reward also led to my burnout. So it's like everything's connected.
Yeah, you would actually think that some of these companies would figure that out, that you can't just like pay your way to retention, or you know what I mean? Like there's lots of factors that go into it where they will give big bonuses because it may be in an area or because, whatever it may be. But sometimes it strictly is because it's a really tough facility to work in and the team is hard, and I feel like sometimes they just, I don't know, like you say, can pay to fix that or something, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah. Money's important, of course, but it's not the only, it's just not like, also another example was that when there were certain like things we were being rewarded for, certain tasks, and the owner would buy not t-shirts, but like yoga pants and apparel, like workout clothes to try to entice us, kind of like someone trying to buy your love. And it actually turned me off even more, because I said, there's a way bigger problem here and you're just trying to fix it with
yoga pants.
Yeah, yoga pants. And I'll take them But like, and I still wear them,
and I will wear them, and I will kind of like that they're comfortable. But I'm just kidding. I totally know what you do.
Yeah, like I'm not gonna stay just for your little gifts and your financial reward because you're trying to, quote unquote, buy my love or buy my commitment. But that's not. If there's other things that are completely being neglected and swept under the rug, that's just not going to fix it. And the last thing in terms of extrinsic factors are values. So this is by far the biggest one, because having a strong match between your values and the values of your workplace connects you to your organization. And when there's more overlap, then there's stronger commitment and engagement. When there's a misalignment with values, as I experienced, then it creates this void and this gap, and actually makes you view your work as meaningless. And when your work is meaningless, that will contribute to the cynicism, being indifferent. That will contribute to the exhaustion, because it takes so much energy to fake it, in a sense, and then feeling low sense of accomplishment. But so it doesn't feel good when you don't align with the values at work.
Absolutely. So okay, those are the basic factors.
Yeah.
Sorry, extrinsic factors. So what about some intrinsic factors that contribute?
Yeah. So I think this is a really important one, and this is one that if you live in the year 2018, that most likely you're suffering from this, which is a hyperactive amygdala. And I have read books just on this. I've attended workshops just on this topic. And it's so important, because gaining an understanding of how our brains work and how we can optimize how we show up in the world and how we can respond instead of react, I think that's so crucial. And I think that if you're in a place where you're burning out, and if you're not aware of it, as many of us are, and I had to develop that awareness. If you're not aware of this and you have hyperactive amygdala and you're reacting to everything, it's only going to, I think, drain you further and accelerate the exhaustion. So I think this is a good one to start with. And living in 2018, we're attached to our phones, and our phones are always around us, and we get notifications and alerts, and we're constantly connected. Even when we're not like looking at our phones, I feel like we're still stressed, or we're still what do I want to say, like we're still on. Like we have to make a conscious effort to turn off. And since the amygdala is responsible for the fight or flight response, and it's strongly involved in emotional responses, anything can trigger that. So we all know that the amygdala, if we're driving and there's an accident, we hit the brakes, and it serves us a purpose. It keeps us alive. But it's the overactivity, the hyperactivity. It's we're just running ourselves to the ground, and we don't realize, I did not realize how serious this was until I attended a workshop, and it was actually done by an OT, and she's saying all these things, and I'm like, yep, that's me. Like, wow. Like, you don't realize how it runs your life, and you're always emotionally reacting instead of letting your prefrontal cortex make logical decisions. And I've learned, when we talk about interventions and those things, I'm going to get into it. Something really simple you can start with. But I just really urge your listeners, if they're wanting to learn more, I suggest reading a book. And actually in that sheet I gave you, I recommended a book about this. That was really helpful, really got me thinking about this. Or attending a workshop, or really trying to understand this, because I think no matter if you're burnt out or not, we're susceptible to this. And there's studies done that our amygdalas, the more we watch the news, or the more, I guess we're on Facebook, or actually I had to delete the Facebook app off my phone, because I still have Facebook, but I don't have it on my phone, just because I felt like it was running the show. And it just, there was a study done in NYU, and researchers there said that your amygdala can actually grow. And so when that happens, we're not letting the prefrontal cortex do its job in terms of making rational, logical decisions and effectively problem solving. So that's the first intrinsic factor that I think can really lead and exacerbate burnout and lead to exhaustion. And I just want to say, even people pleasing is actually a fight or flight response, which I didn't know. So,
oh man,
it's. I'm in like a recovery people pleaser, and that comes from a fear that you don't want something to happen. So that's your version of fighting. Like, fighting doesn't always have to be this aggressive thing. Like, people pleasing is a sign of fighting in terms of that. So it's very interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. I know. I mean, it's so hard when you're in it, and that's why I'm excited. I mean, while we're having this conversation, because it gets so emotional, right? And it's that fight or flight, and you just kind of, I don't know. It's so hard. So, okay, we've talked about intrinsic, extrinsic factors and some of those things. So, okay, how do we prevent it, or how do we avoid? Let's start with that, and then we'll kind of get into like when we're already burnt out. So yeah, how do we avoid it, or how do we prevent it?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and I love that you ask that, because I don't think it wasn't on my radar. Like, I never thought it was a non-issue to me, like when I first started, because I never considered this to be a possibility, because OT is such a great career. Like, how could I ever burn out?
Yeah, right. And
it doesn't matter your career. It's just there's pros and cons to every career, and burnout can definitely happen. In healthcare, we're more susceptible to it. So it's important to understand and to start the conversation about prevention. So in terms of personal factors, talking about the amygdala, and the very first thing that I started doing once I removed myself, which I should have been doing if I would have known better, but once I removed myself from the situation and started working on myself, the first thing I started was mindfulness. And there are so many studies that there was one study that mindfulness training reduced burnout in some social workers and psychologists, and I think physicians. And there are some free mindfulness training courses online, but I personally love Headspace. It's an app where I meditate 10 minutes a day, and you might think that it's something extra, like something frivolous, but it's absolutely the foundation of activating your prefrontal cortex. And the more you practice mindfulness, the stronger and more natural it becomes in your daily life. And I find myself pulling back when I want to snap at my husband because I'm practicing some mindfulness, and it works. It like just those 10 minutes in the morning, just like you need to brush your teeth, you need to get ready for work. 10 minutes of mindfulness will change your life, whether you do it in the morning or before bed. I definitely recommend that to start with, is taking an internal inventory of how you respond, how you respond to life. With that being said, I personally love journaling. There was a study on nurses, and they took journaling classes, and after, I forgot how many weeks it was, but their burnout symptoms reduced because journaling allowed them to develop insight and awareness and compassion. So I don't think there's any strict rules to journaling. I just journal whatever I'm feeling. 5 minutes. It could be like 2 lines or a whole page or 5 pages, whatever you want. Another thing is building resilience. And I think I've read so many studies that, like, oh, I've read this study, I've done this study. But there was one study where they almost said, like, hospitals try to solve burnout by promoting resilience training, and but it's not enough because it is a system issue. So it is important, but it's not the only component. And I think a lot of places try to use that solely as like, this will solve your burnout. That plus a million other things put in place, working together, are going to help. And resilience is just about being committed to your mission, knowing what is in your control and knowing what is out of your control. And then every challenge you see, view it as a challenge and not a threat or a stressor. So I feel like sometimes in your whatever setting you are, there are days where you're just putting out fires, and viewing that as a fun challenge, almost like you're in a video game or you're in a movie. Like, I've done that. It makes things so much better versus seeing everything as like a life or death threat. It's actually just changing your perspective a little bit really helps. And, you know, with that being said, developing an internal locus of control. So knowing that, you know, we learned about this in OT school, the learned helplessness, external locus of control. And if you are a victim to everything, I've read that those people that have that tendency to be have more of external locus of control, that they actually do less active coping, because why bother? Because everything is out of my control. So when you have that internal locus of control, you're more apt to cultivate active problem solving, active coping mechanisms, and you're more likely to do something about it. Like, you can change the way you see your stressors and your threats as challenges. So that's, I think that I felt like when I was burning out over the course of those years, I felt like everything was happening to me and I was reacting. But now I have a mantra that everything happens for me and I'm in control, and I'm not in control of everything, but I know what I'm in control of, and that gives me peace of mind. That it's just like a mindset shift, really.
Yeah, looking at it from a different perspective. Thinking about it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
Easier said than done. But like you said, I think those things that you can practice and learn the strategies, I think is so important. Gosh. For sure.
Yeah, that's just internally. I mean, like, how to avoid burnout, working on yourself. I mean, there's other things from an organizational perspective that you can do. Should I go into that?
Maybe just briefly, and then
Okay.
Kind of like.
Yeah, I have just like a quick little overview, because a lot of it is leadership and. But from what you can do in terms of improving the dynamics of your workplace, it's just finding, like, have you heard of the love languages?
Yes, I love the love languages. I already know mine.
What is it?
Mine is quality time and physical touch.
Oh, yeah.
So let's do a quick brief, because I love the love languages. Why don't you just give a quick overview of what the love languages are?
Yeah. So there's 5 love languages, and it's also applicable to work. So I think for work, it's called appreciation languages, but it's the same thing. So you have words of affirmation, like praise, positive.
You did a good job.
Yeah, like positive feedback, maybe emails, and then you have the physical touch, which of course, for more intimate social, at work it's like high fives, handshake.
Right. It's all different depending on the situation.
Gifts, some people love gifting. So at work, the person that always buys a birthday gift, desk trinkets, that sort of thing, thank you cards,
yoga pants.
Yes. You have the quality time, like that's your love language. At work, that would be maybe happy hours with the team after work, or lunches, staying late, those type of things. And then acts of service, like helping out, like clean the office, or helping with a task, or organizing an event. So understanding what your coworkers' love languages are, and understanding what yours is, and being really open about how to show appreciation is key, because at the end of it, like values, like I mentioned, is a huge one. So sharing your values with your organization is one thing, but having that community and that appreciation for another is going to get you very far.
Oh yeah. We'll add a lot of these apps and books and all this stuff. Ericka made a really great handout. I'll put in the show notes as well. So if you're kind of wanting to look at more information on some of these things, because these are really great resources. But I completely agree. There's so much that goes into it that it's like, I don't know. It's a big topic, but it's also like there's lots of strategies that you can do to prevent or help with. Okay, so now that we've talked about all these other things, that let's talk about our team. Like what if you're already burnout? What if our team is already burnout? We're already there. What are some things that we can do?
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, burnout can be it's more likely a social phenomenon. So it's very likely if someone's feeling it, a lot more people are feeling it too. So the first thing I can say, and also it doesn't happen overnight. So once you feel it and once it hits you, it's already like in full effect. So yeah. I think the first thing you can do and everyone can do is take that deep breath. And like I said with the amygdala, really coming from a deep breath and practicing that mindfulness is going to slow you down, enable or activate your prefrontal cortex to solve problems logically. So just start with your breath. Take a deep breath. Everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to work out. And I think if you're actively problem solving with your team, I think you can do what I would call a stress audit or a checklist, something that you guys or whoever, someone, maybe the supervisor or the coworkers can implement, which is kind of like something you can find online. There's plenty of them, but stress audit, it's like a check-in, like when you get your car, your oil change, it's kind of like that. Like every so often you're checking in, looking at the entire energy of the team, and are you feeling a little bit stale, bored, or is it too much and everyone's crashing? So just assessing the overall energy of the team, that would be a great place to start. But I think even before that, it's important that you and your team and your leaders and everyone can be on the same page in terms of having two-way street type of meetings. I mean, because most meetings that I've been a part of, it's been one way, and it's when I say we, like me and my coworkers, we always leave feeling like, we feel so terrible about ourselves, and it's never this open communication. It's always like, okay, I feel we're being spoken at, instead of a collaborative brainstorming type of meeting. And I think just opening the conversation for that, where everyone is involved, and avoiding us versus them type of language, just being able to clearly state problems each way without putting blame on anyone, I think could be really effective. And then you can go about seeing what kind of strategies you can implement as a team, because at the end of the day, we all want to feel heard and understood and appreciated. So just having a one-way communication, it's like that old school, I've seen photos of the boss leading versus a leader leading, and leaders lead with their team and bosses just are in the front. And I forgot what the picture is, but like, you know what I mean? So it's like, I think an effective leader would be open to that and giving some ownership over certain things, and really like coming together for collaborative brainstorming. Sometimes I'll talk too fast. I've stuttered my whole life, so I just gotta slow it down sometimes. But yeah, taking a look at that and really respecting time off and encouraging time off, because I keep going back to this time when I was so burnt out, where I took a paid vacation, a week off, and when I got back, I did have some evals that were left that I hadn't done, because I had 10 evals given to me on a Thursday and Friday, and I left on a trip Saturday, so it was impossible. Yeah. And I was being reprimanded, and it's like, I've been away where work has emailed me, and it's like really being respectful of everyone's time off and encouraging active recovery time out of work, just being understanding of that people aren't just work, they are people. I think it's really important, and just being open with any stigmas around burnout. Like self-care and self-development shouldn't be a taboo, and I think we're getting better about it, but really encouraging maybe perhaps bringing in something fresh into the office, like a meditation for the office, or a yoga session, or you have your stereotypical team building things where you're like, oh my God, get me out of here type of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's like just hearing what people need and how you can best support them is crucial. And that comes from a lot of understanding of people, understanding of group dynamics, and working together.
Yeah, that stuff is amazing. That kind of is a really good segue into talking a little bit about your continuing ed course that you developed. It's called Bash the Burnout for Healthcare Professionals. Can you give a good overview of what people would kind of learn? I was kind of digging into it, and in addition to all the modules, I love the workbook that you added with that. So talk about the course and talk about what are people going to get out of it.
Sure. So, I mean, this course is A to Z, and I'm so proud of it. It took so long, but it's finally out. And yeah. I mean, as of now, as of my current research, there's nothing left out. I even have a good friend of mine. She's a dietitian, and I wanted to cover everything. So there's even a segment on nutrition for optimal energy, just because I want this course to be comprehensive, 7 hours, but you're going to take so much from it. And right now it's in an online format, so you can complete it at your own pace. And we really go into understanding what burnout is, and understanding how it's impacting us and empowering ourselves with that knowledge. And then we go into internal resources. So all the science behind effective coping, optimism, resilience, time, productivity, all that stuff, more of the internalized stuff. And then we move into energy. So that's where my friend, the dietitian, comes in. I talk about sleep, optimal sleep, chronotypes, figuring out what your chronotype is and knowing what that is, and how to implement a strategy so that you can have your most optimal energy. And then going into the organizational systems aspect of it, which I kind of covered now, but it's going really in depth. And my husband, he took on that part because he's so interested in and invested in Joy Energy Time. So his support has been tremendous. And so he does the last 2 modules talking about how, like, really getting into like, okay, let's look at the system. How can we improve the system? Because that's really where the biggest problem is. So it's A to Z. There it is.
Oh, well, and I love like the practical strategies and like how you can, like, things that you can just like learn and like take away. You know what I mean? Like, I think those are the types of courses that I really like. You need the research to support it and all the background information, but it's also like, how can we implement this? And that stuff is amazing. So be sure to check that out. I'll add that in the show notes. It's at joyenergytime.com. And then she even gave all of you listeners, a $10 off if you use my promo code Mandy10, MANDY 10. So get $10 off, check it out. And it's at joyenergytime.com. And it's basically right there on the website, isn't it? Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's at the top where it's courses.
And you have check it out. I'll link to it in the show notes. And then you have so many awesome like resources for people. You have like the burnout prevention guide. If you guys want to download that, get on it. What else? It's just I love listening to other OTs that have such a passion for sharing their knowledge and educating everyone. It's just, it's great. I love it.
Thank you. I mean, I'm so inspired by this, obviously, and I love giving, and the more resources I can give, and I just feel like that's what I'm all about, is just giving, from turning my experience into something that I have the opportunity to give as much as I can.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Ericka.
Thank you for having me. It's like OT to OT, which I don't get to do very much on my show. So yeah.
I I know. Oh, I know. But you get to listen, you get to talk to so many exciting, people from all over healthcare, which is great too. But everyone, check out Ericka's podcast, Burnout to Lit Up podcast. Check out joyenergytime.com. Check her. She is a little spitfire of knowledge, so check it out. Thanks everyone for listening, and until next time.
Do you feel like you're navigating the OT world without a map? Not feeling confident or competent in your day-to-day treatments and struggling to apply your knowledge clinically? Then be sure to check out the Seniors Flourish Learning Lab membership. It has all the treatment ideas, patient handouts, clinical resources, community support, and mentorship you need to succeed. Join today at seniorsflourish.com/learninglab.